Father in heaven, we do want to thank you. Take this time to recognize that you are the sovereign of the universe. Nothing happens without your okay, your approval. Lord, we just want to thank you for your many blessings throughout the week. You've preserved us as only you can do. And you've blessed us in so many ways as only you can do. And so we want to thank you for those things. We do want to lift up the Martin family this week as they have suffered the loss of a daughter. There are others that that we may know and love that particularly need you at this moment. We pray, Lord, you'll draw close to each person. And as we go through our time of study together today, we ask that your Spirit will be here to impress and inspire. We need insight, we need an understanding, we need your wisdom to carry us through the times that we're living in, the times that are ahead. And as we study through your book, we pray, Lord, that we will indeed be prepared for that time, for that moment. We do ask that you would use us in whatever way possible to strengthen our families, to reach others, of course, and to accomplish the mission that you set forth for your people at the end, the remnant. So guide and direct us to this end. Forgive us where we have failed you and use us in the finishing your great work. We ask and pray in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen and amen. Okay. Last week we talked about handing out some notebooks. How many of you guys grabbed a notebook and took it with you? I think that most people forgot their notebooks.
But maybe you didn't forget to think about what the Lord's doing in your life.
Right. God works in so many wonderful ways. Most of those things we take for granted. We get up, we go to work, or we get involved in our daily activities. And you know,
forgot to turn the sound off on here.
There was a program that came out probably a decade or two ago where a radio host, Christian radio host, was doing a program called, I think it was the God Hunt or something like that, where they actually sent you out notebooks and you were to kind of chronicle throughout the week all the ways in which you could see, all the ways that we could recognize how God was working in your behalf. And unless we intentionally think about it, we don't really recognize how God is working. Every breath that you take, every function that you have physically, it's all a gift from Him. But typically we go about our daily activities just kind of oblivious to all the ways that God is working in us and for us and so forth. It's only when something really unusual, something really incredible, or even what we would call miraculous takes place that we all of a sudden say, oh yeah, God really has stepped in there and was helping me. But we don't recognize that He's actually stepped in there for the whole day. Lamentations is so clear, Lamentations chapter 3 is so clear that if it weren't for His faithfulness, we would simply be consumed. In other words, we wouldn't make it the next day if it weren't for God being there and being really an integral part of our daily activity. We just don't recognize it because we're distracted. Life has a way of distracting us. And of course we get busy doing things, and God knows we have to go out and work and we have to accomplish things, we have to stay busy, etc. But I think it's really important for us, particularly now at this time in history, to start to recognize how involved He is, how totally involved He is in our day-to-day, moment-by-moment, hour-by-hour life. You go out there and you work in the garden or something, He's there providing the rain and the sunshine and germinating the seeds and so forth. All of that's taking place. Most people don't have a clue or a thought about how God provides because they just go to the grocery store. That's where we get our blessing. That's where we get our provisions. God has to make it grow somewhere. even if you pick it up at the grocery store, he's got to make it go someplace. So it's we thought that this would be a good time in the beginning of our program to start to chronicle and identify how the Lord is working, because He is working. We know that He's
Create an
working.
attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, that's a great little slang saying, or an attitude
It's
of
not
gratitude.
slang, it's just a catchy.
Yeah, catchy statement there. Attitude of gratitude. So how about this week? Anybody? Let's see. As you were driving down the road, anybody drive their vehicles this week? Probably everybody here was in a vehicle at some point, and you went from point A to point B, and maybe other destinations. Who kept you safe on the highway? The Martin family experienced, who we don't know intimately, but we've known them in the past, and they lost a daughter to a traffic accident this week. That's horrible, a young person, and who knows what the circumstances were, but it doesn't make any difference at this point. The end result is tragic. And so how often, we're in our vehicles and we take for granted the fact that we were able to reach our destination.
And how much more we need to recognize that how dangerous the roads are. We shouldn't leave in our vehicles without taking time to pray and asking the Lord to protect us.
Yeah.
We shouldn't take it for granted that just because we get in the car and go.
Right.
It's always good to be thankful that we have a car, but thankful that He protects us along the way.
Yeah. I know I always give this example when sometimes when people find out that I travel, and have traveled a lot in the past overseas to, some countries that are not as friendly to the U.S. as you would hope. And they say, aren't you afraid, and so forth. And I say, well, no, I've never really thought about it, because I've always felt I was on God's mission. I was on God's timetable specifically, and obviously He would provide all the traveling mercies and watch over us and so forth. But what you hear when you turn on, the reason they ask me that is because they hear a lot on the news about problems happening, in different parts of the country and how dangerous it is. It's really dangerous everywhere in the world. The Bible says that at the end of time, it would be a perilous time or a dangerous time to live. If the media overseas, if I were in Turkey or Iran or someplace like that, and their news services played or reported on a regular basis the number of automobile fatalities in this country on the highways, they just kind of kept that before their population, their people, they would come to the conclusion, you could never go and visit the United States. Because, 50,000 people a year die on the highway. It's so dangerous to drive over there. You could never come here and feel safe in driving. 50,000, almost 1,000 people a week are dying on the highway. It's such a dangerous place. But yet, when we get up and go out and get in the car and drive off, do we ever think about that? We don't think one thought in that regard. It's just a matter of how publicized that information is, And if you have an accident or you're injured and you need to go to the hospital, we don't think, a hospital's a dangerous place. 500,000 people a year, 10 times more people die from accidental incidences in hospitals than even on the highway. But we don't have any apprehension about going to the hospital. We don't think that's a dangerous place, you see. It's all a matter of your perspective, etc. But these are just the statistics. If they were before the people all the time, we would think, wow, we have to really be on our guard. Well, what the Bible is saying to us is that we live in a dangerous world, and at any moment something could happen. And if it weren't for God's faithfulness, for His mercy, we would simply be consumed. The devil, particularly if you're a Christian, the devil wants to get. He doesn't want your influence out there. He don't want you talking to neighbors, co-workers, friends, family members. He don't want you influencing them in any way to embrace what God has for you. He doesn't want that. So, he's going to try to create circumstances. He's going to try to create problems so that you end up being hurt or injured or killed. God overcomes that. God oversees that. Okay. Sometimes good things, sometimes bad things happen to good people. We can talk about that someday. Why bad things happen to, quote, good people. What are we all deserving of?
Death.
The Bible says we're all deserving of death because we've all sinned. But praise God that He has a work for us to do, a mission for us to accomplish, and He works in us and through us, and He knows what's best. So we have to trust Him in that regard. And at any rate, we want the folks that are here, and maybe you that are watching at some point, you can do the same thing. You can start to journal. How you can tell God is working in your behalf. First of all, when you wake up in the morning, that's a gift. God's given you life another day. How are you going to best use that day to bring glory and honor to His name? That's the question that we should be asking every morning. So anyway, it'd be
Well, you're in preaching mode this morning, aren't you?
it'd be nice to be able to start jotting that down so that we can, to chronicle that so that we can go ahead and share those kind of things with other people. I think the more we recognize how God's working in us and for us, the more we'll recognize how He's working through us. Does that make sense? Hopefully so.
Give anybody a chance to tell what the Lord's done this week?
Go ahead. Who would like to start?
Anybody's had any good things happen this week? Elijah looks like he's ready to say something.
Just the usual. Business is kind of picking up and things are moving on. And so, in that
It's
sense,
doing well for a business that's just started, too.
And that's a tremendous blessing that occurs when people when they launch out in faith, hoping to do something significant for the community.
Trina says good morning.
Yeah, well, good morning to her too.
I was thinking
And others?
this week about one of the blessings that we're starting to enjoy. I've been looking for ways to treat Lyme disease, and there have been so many things. I've tried herbs and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that was consistently recommended was heat, because Lyme tricks your body into lowering your thermostat so you don't get hot enough to kill it off. So a lot of people are using different types of fever therapy. We looked into hot tubs, getting a hot tub. We looked into an infrared sauna, and we're talking about a couple $1,000s for any of those to get them. And then finding a place to put it and all the other stuff that goes with it. And I just happened to click on Craigslist one morning, hadn't looked at it in a couple of weeks, and looked to see what was on there for sale. And somebody had a Russian steam cabinet, which is like a sauna, but it's a cabinet that you sit in, and it's like a cabinet you sit in from the neck down. And it produces steam, which is just hot water, and it raises your body temperature and detoxes your system. And I thought, well, that might be a good option. Well, the lady wanted $75 for this thing. And I started looking online, and the newest ones that are out there run about $3,300. So I thought, well, $75, it can't hurt to put that much into something like that. And it was just neat, because I've been looking for like 3 months now, trying to price saunas, trying to figure out how to build our own, looking at hot tubs and
Lamps.
pros and heat lamps, and looking at so many options. And all along, the Lord had this cabinet out there waiting for the right time. And the lady that had it had bought it at an auction and thought she would use it more than she did, and she just wanted someone else to benefit from it. So we've been using that this week, and I thought, wasn't that interesting how, I wasn't particularly looking for anything that morning when I turned on Craigslist. I really hadn't even looked at it in a while because I hadn't really been interested in buying anything. So I just happened to click on it and take a look, and there was this thing, and it's perfect. And $75 is a whole lot better than $3,000 on the budget.
And quite particularly, rest assured that God is always working behind the scenes. 1,000 ways which we know not, right? He's always working in behalf of His children behind the scenes, kind of pulling strings, developing circumstances so that He brings you to a place where you can receive the blessing that He intended for you to receive. So even now, right now at this moment, you know, in each of our lives, God is working to arrange things in a certain particular, so that at a certain moment, when we could particularly bring glory and honor to His name, and that's Rose is saying, praise God for what that blessing, you know. He's always working, never sleeps. You know, we go to bed and we're unconscious for a third of our lives practically. We're not able to do anything at that point, right? But yet God is always working. So, you know, just the fact that He's always there and He's got things in motion. He's always way ahead of us. I mean, you see in Scripture, when you see the journey of His people, always way ahead of them. You know, 1,500 years before the children of Israel were going to go to the Gulf of Aqaba and cross through the sea there, God put a land bridge under it. 1,500 years before, during the flood runoff, He put a land bridge under it at the precise moment. And the real miracle, for those that aren't aware, is this is a bridge that's 8 miles, the Gulf of Aqaba is 8 miles wide, and it's over 5,000 feet deep. It's probably 6, 7, 8,000 feet deep. It's a big gorge. But during the runoff of the flood, 1,500 years before, the children of Israel are going to be standing on the beach. So this is before any of them were even born. Right? Runoff from the floodwaters come out from one side and come out from the other side and meet up in the middle. I mean, that's an astounding miracle in itself, that sediment would wash out from each side of the gorge and meet up in the middle and develop this land bridge that would provide a 6-degree slope through the seabed, through this gorge. So God is always just way ahead of us in planning. And
what about the miracle of them even finding it?
yeah, I mean, yeah, well, I mean, what did He? How did He take them there? He drops a pillar. He knows it's going to be hot during the day and it's going to be cold at night in the desert, and so he has a pillar of fire at night to give them light and warmth, and He has a pillar of cloud during the day to give them shade, and that pillar is leading them where He wants to take them. I mean, that's pretty blatant. I mean, that's no way is that subtle. That's very blatant. But yet God wants to lead us in a similar fashion today, doesn't He? And what's He given us? Here's our pillar right here. Here's our fire and our cloud and our pillar right here. You know. Anything else? Anybody else?
I was thinking about the story of Joseph too.
Yeah.
You know, God knew there was going to be a famine,
Right.
and He would need to protect His people. So He allows Joseph to go into slavery, into the worst of all possible
Yeah.
fates to befall somebody. He lets him go into slavery, ultimately puts him into a prison, which is even worse than slavery.
Having been falsely accused.
Yeah. And so he has all those years of being mistreated, misunderstood, after he had these dreams about his father and his brothers bowing to him. Then they sell him into slavery, and he gets into Egypt. And
His own
like,
family does that.
Yeah.
His own siblings.
And so, but God knew there was going to be a famine, and they wouldn't survive unless He got Joseph to that point and orchestrated those events with the
Right.
dreams and visions there that would get him to the
So
prime
sometimes
minister.
that's right. So sometimes God has to plug us into a place that's very uncomfortable. In fact, what we would call even detrimental, dangerous. Plugs us in somewhere, knowing that in the near future that's going to be necessary for us to be a certain place at a certain time. That's just astounding. That story is just
I knew
astounding.
when I was a teenager, I was devastated at the idea that we had to move from the only home I'd ever known. And suddenly the rug's pulled out from under my family, and we have to move in 30 days, and there's 5 kids in the family and not a lot of money to go around. And Dad was able to sell enough of his gun collection to get a down payment, and they found a house that was vacant, was in foreclosure. They got it for a song practically, and they got in there in 30 days, which was a huge miracle. Do you think I was thankful for that miracle? Nah, I was too mad at him for making me lose that house. But that house was in the neighborhood where I would end up meeting Jerry, and if we had lived up here, I would never have crossed paths with him down here. So,
Yeah.
you know, at 14, he moves me to this place that I absolutely hated, and then takes me away from there to church school for a couple of years. So I don't even end up meeting him until after graduation. And it was just a sheer fluke that I happened to be at the bowling alley that night, because I had no interest in bowling. My
She
folks
hadn't
were
been at the
bowlers.
bowling alley, you
And
wouldn't
we ended
know.
up going there. You know, they wanted me to come over and watch them bowl, and I'm like, whatever, you know. I was not interested in bowling. I wasn't interested in anything that had to do with life in that part of the county, because I was still unhappy about living there. But that's where I met him, you know.
And it's a whole story as to why God needed to put us together. Okay, and it really involves all of this behind me here, particularly, but then also to have 9 children, and you know, for all of that to develop. So at any rate, I mean, you can
We
see.
wouldn't be sitting here today.
No, yeah, you can see how God works in that regard.
I mean, it's not to say that he wouldn't have hadn't had another plan and worked things out differently, but it was just interesting that this was something that at the time I thought was one of the worst things that could happen in my life, and turned out to be the biggest blessing in my life. Took a few years to find that out.
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of what we want to do, and I'm sure at some point we'll maybe get back to at times doing some story time as well. But we want to make it a little more real. The things that we've been reading about have been other people that have accomplished great things for God. He wants to do the same thing through all of us. But we need to recognize how He's working, how He's moving. And so that's why we want you to take a book and start journaling, chronicling how God's how God's working, and recognizing more His blessings. Okay, so I guess if nothing else, nobody else wants to add anything to that, we'll move to our study time. Is that okay? All right, so we've been in the book of Revelation, and chapter 7 is a particularly fascinating chapter that John is revealing. Chapter 7 is really the answer. There's kind of a literary separation between the 6th and the 7th seal. You will notice that in chapter 8, verse 1, that's when the 7th seal is opened. Chapter, of course, 6 deals with the end of chapter 6 deals with the opening of the 6th seal. And they ask that question at the end. What's the question that's asked there at the end of chapter 6? For the great day of God's wrath has come. Pardon me?
Who will be able to stand?
Who's going to be able to survive it? Okay. Of course, the 6th seal deals with ultimately the second coming of Christ. And when He comes, the unrighteous do what? What's their reaction? Are they wanting to see this supernatural being coming to rescue the faithful? Not at all. In fact, they're like, we don't want any part of this, and they run for the the rocks and the mountains. And so then, of course, the earth is in trauma as this is happening. The sky is rolling back, receding like a scroll unrolling, and all kinds of things are happening. And so, but they're not. Most importantly, they don't want to see their Creator. They don't want to see the one that gave them life, and so they're fleeing from that. Just like in the garden, when God came to see Adam and Eve in the garden after they had sinned, what was their reaction? Oh, we need to go and hide. We need to run and hide. We don't want to see. Oh no, we don't want to face Him. Same thing that's happening at the end. But the faithful are waiting, right? They're looking up. Lo, this is our God, and He will save us. But the question is, through all this trauma that's going to precede that second coming, how's anybody going to be able to survive that? How's anybody going to be able to stand through that? Chapter 7 is all about the group. Chapter 7 primarily is about the group who's going to survive the calamities of the close of probation and the great time of trouble and even the early time of trouble, etc. Okay? So that's what chapter 7 is all about. There's a kind of an interlude there, a literary interlude where where John is making sure, here's the answer to that question, because we're not really given a lot of the specifics in regards. We're given some generalities in regards to the falling of the trumpets, and then of course probationary time closes, and then you have the plagues, the latter plagues, 7 last plagues as they're called. After that, we're given generalities for a reason. If God gave us more specific information on those times, nobody would want to live through that. Okay, we can't even imagine a world in that condition, and so God has just left that unclear, out of focus, because He needs, He wants and He needs to have a group of people that will live through that time. Okay, and it's because there's a purpose for that. It's not just an arbitrary thing, but there's a purpose for God having a group of people, and a specific group of people living through what the Bible calls a time of trouble such as never was. Right? And there's a reason for that. Now, what's interesting also in the way that the book of Revelation is structured, chapter 7 comes before chapters 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14. Okay, so you have God, you have the focus on the faithful or the remnant or the wise virgins or whatever you want to call them. You have the focus on this group of people that will survive. Before God makes sure that they come first before we talk about any trouble. Do you see that as significant? Before we talk about any trouble, any trumpets sounding, any woes taking place, any plagues falling, you have God talking about, here is a group that will survive. By grace, they will survive. Okay, and so it's important that we recognize that the chapter 7 of Revelation is all about the main focus, the main consideration is this group that will survive this time of trouble. Is somebody coming?
Kenny.
Kenny's coming? Okay.
She hears somebody's in the yard. Little ears.
He's really running late this morning. So we'll give him a chance to get on in here. So.
He's struggling with those steps too. He's got to get around those steps.
Yeah, okay. Here's the baby.
Our alarm system is fully functional today.
Bark at somebody, you don't wag your tail.
Yeah.
That's a sign she's not going to bite you.
Yes. Good morning, Ken.
Watch out, hobo. I'm a little late.
You got a late start this morning, but that's okay.
That's Larry's fault.
Larry's fault? Okay. All right.
He's got my watch an hour off.
Time change, huh?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit ago. About the time change. We're just now starting to basically review where we were from last week. We had a little.
You haven't missed a whole lot.
You haven't missed really any of the study per se. We were just talking about how important chapter 7 of the book of Revelation was, because we're continuing in that today. And you see, of course, I've got the board back up here, just as a means of refresher. I kind of angled the board, hopefully, so that there's not as much glare on it. But you can see here what we're contrasting here, because there is differing opinion in regards to who this group is that's being introduced in chapter 7, known as the 144,000. And also there's a group called the Great Multitude. And so what we're doing is here, we're just contrasting here, putting down things here, contrasting those two. Okay. Now eventually, we'll also look at another contrast, right? And that's between this number here. We'll contrast that number with this number. Okay. Right? We'll also look at the contrast between those two. I don't know if we'll get to that today, but we had been focusing on the divisions. Last week we went through half of the tribes. But what we want to do here is we want to make sure people understand that the whole chapter, really the main focus of the chapter is on the 144,000, a specific group of people. Okay? John starts out by saying, I heard the number. Okay, I heard the number. There's no reason, there's absolutely no literary reason, or there's no spiritual reason for John to give us a specific number unless that number was important, unless that number was significant. Does that make sense? There's no reason to even put a number in there unless there's some significance to it.
Well, I don't
Okay.
think he made it up.
Right. I don't think he didn't pull it out of a hat. He didn't just, God was giving him the insight. Right? If all that needed to be said, if all that needed to be said was there's just this group of people that are going to live through to the end, that's all John needed to say. He didn't need to put a specific number on it, but he did so. It's not arbitrary. He did so for a reason. Reasons, probably. Okay? All right, so John mentions a specific number that he heard. Okay? Then, right, he says, but this specific group is going to be part of a larger group, but where? Where is that going to take place? In heaven. Okay? So once the scene changes from earth, which is where this group is seen and sealed, once you look at a heavenly throne, around the throne of God in heaven, they become part of an unnumberable group that nobody can number. Okay? So you got specific number over here, an unspecified number over here, small remnant, large multitude. So you see the difference, that how we're contrasting this. Okay? A lot of people, what's being taught in the seminaries today is that this group and this group are the same group. Okay? And there would be no reason, to me, that's just a lack of common sense, and that's being promoted for a specific reason. And we talked about that last week. So if this is your first time joining us, you can go back and listen to it. There's a motivation for combining these two as the same. Okay, there's a motivation for doing that. But Scripture is very clear that we're talking. The main focus is this group here in chapter 7. This is the answer. They are the answer to that question that was asked at the end of chapter 6. Who? Is there going to be anybody who's going to be able to survive what the earth is going to go through? What society is going to go through? Is there anybody that's going to be able to survive that? John says, yes, this specific group of people will be able to survive that. They are part of this group once you get into heaven. Okay? You're dealing with the living saints at the end. You're dealing with the resurrected saints around the throne from all time, from the last 6,000 years of probation. Okay? This group gets sectioned into 12 equal parts. That's where you end up with the 12,000 number. Okay? This group is made up of every nation, kindred, tongue, people. Okay? Every nation, kindred, tongue, people. All right? So what we want to do, last week we started to look at the divisions, where this number was being divided. And the way that it's being divided, when you look here at chapter 7, open your Bibles to chapter 7 there. This group is in development before the time of probationary time closes. Okay? They're in development. And they have to be sealed. Remember we talked about them being sealed, and the reason for them being sealed, we went back to the example of Noah. When Noah and his family went into the ark and God closed the door, God sealed them in, right? The same thing is really happening, and for the same reason, at the end of time. Instead of just 8 people, though, you have 144,000 people that are going to be sealed and protected once probationary time closes and literally all hell breaks loose on this planet. Okay? Which would be the full, right, before probation closes, you have mediation, you have intercession. God's wrath cannot be poured out as long as you have that intercessory activity going on. Once that ceases, the full wrath of God is being presented as being poured out on humanity. At that time, God's people, the saints, the 144,000 are protected during that time. Okay, so before that time, you have people that are righteous, suffering along the same lines as all the other humanity. Many will be laid to rest. Many saints will be laid to rest. This is the real reason why the seminaries are teaching now that this great multitude will go through to the end. They don't want that whittling down of the saints. They don't want that whittling down, that number. You know, there are millions and millions and millions of saints in the world today. If you whittle that number down to 144,000, you have millions of Christians succumbing to the falling of the trumpets and being laid to rest. Right? The seminaries don't want to teach that. Right? They don't want to recognize that this is what God has planned, and for a specific reason He has planned it that way. Okay, and we'll get into that probably next week.
What's the 12,000 for?
Okay, the 12,000. As you get down into verse 4 and 5. Here, look at chapter 7 here. I heard the number of those who were sealed, who were protected through this time after probation closes. 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Reading from the New King James here. And then it starts to itemize, starts to break those tribes down. The tribe of Judah, 12,000, right? The tribe of Reuben, 12,000. The tribe of Gad, 12,000. So that's where the 12,000
all add up to 144,000.
Right, so you have 12 of these tribes pictured here, and you have 12,000 being pictured from every tribe. Okay?
Who are they actually? There are no tribes anymore. So
Right.
who are they and where are they coming from?
Right. Of course, there's a reason why, we talked about it last week, the reason why John uses these tribes, the nation of Israel, which was made up of the Jacob's original sons, the original sons of Jacob made up the 12 tribes. And so, but by the time you get to Revelation, those tribes are still there. That was 2,000 years, 34 A.D. 34 A.D. actually, which is before the time that John is writing this. So after John writes this, the nation of Israel's probation has ended in 34 A.D. They've had their 2,000 years in development from 1967 BC to 34 AD. They've had their 2,000 years, just like the antediluvians, the ones that lived before the flood, just like they had they had the Adamic dispensation. They had their 2,000 years of history. The Jews have their 2,000 years of history, and it ends in 34 AD. But the tribes are still around. The remnants of those tribes still go on. You'll find even today people that are descendants from those Jewish tribes. Okay, but it's not literal Israel that's a player at the end of time so much as it is spiritual Israel.
Spiritual.
Okay,
Well, we're spiritual. Israel.
we're spiritual Jews, right? We've been grafted in. Once you become a Christian, you're grafted into the vine, you become a part of spiritual Israel. Okay? So it's not so literal Israel, their probation ends in 34 AD. But John is very familiar with them. John is in one of the tribes, right? And so he's a descendant from one of the tribes. So he's given this information of something that he is personally personally understands the significance of these tribes. And one of the things that we mentioned last week is that there's a reason why God is inspiring John to break this number down and to utilize these tribes. For example, why did we say that the tribe of Judah was not the first son? Who was Jacob's first son? Who was the first tribe basically mentioned? Okay, Reuben is the first tribe, the first son of Jacob by Leah, right? Okay. But when you get to Revelation, John, the not only the name of the tribe that's mentioned, but the sequence of how they're listed is also significant. And this is where the symbolism starts to break forth concerning the 144,000. Right? It's a literal number, but it's also symbolic. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, about how all the numbers in the book of Revelation are both literal and symbolic. You start to see the symbolism breaking forth here as the number gets broken down into these 12 tribes. Right? Judah is first mentioned. Why is Judah the first mentioned tribe?
It was the line of Christ.
It's the line of the Messiah. And so you begin to, as you go through these, you begin to recognize were Jacob's sons, when Jacob raised his family and his sons grew up, they were just perfect. From adolescence on, they were just perfect human beings, rightly representing Israel, right?
No.
I hear moans, I hear groans. No, they were real rascals, a lot of them, right? I mean, they sold their brother into slavery, right? They did crazy stuff.
This little Joseph, because he thought his daddy favored him over the rest.
Right. But by the time Joseph ends up ascending to being second in command in Egypt, they've had time. This is such an example of beloved, now are we the sons of God, but it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he appears we shall be like him. This is such an example of that, of how a person becomes a Christian. God takes you where you are, and he begins a process of molding you and making you after his will. And what does he have to whittle away? He has to whittle away all those inherited and cultivated tendencies to evil. He has to whittle all that away till by his grace we end up becoming more in his image, after his likeness. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, by beholding we become changed into his image, into the same image. Okay, let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. For God works in us to will and to do after his good pleasure. Okay, so there's this growing process that takes, just like we grow physically, we grow spiritually, right? When we're born, when we're born again, we're born as a babe in the faith, and so we have to grow. And what really John is describing here through these tribes is he's describing character development, character maturity, and this is the expectation that God has. You see, when John asked that question in chapter 6, who's going to be able to survive through this? Basically, the answer is those who have developed a character of Christ-likeness. That's the ones that are going to be able to stand. That's the ones that are going to be sealed, okay? Because they've followed the will of God. That's what Noah did. God came down and said, Noah, here's plans. I want you to build this boat. For 120 years, he's building the boat and he's developing all the supplies and things necessary to survive the flood. The same thing is happening spiritually at the end. God has this expectation that people will develop a character after his character, because it's his character that's on trial. It's his character that needs to be vindicated just before probationary time closes. That is reflected in not just a person here and a person there and a person there, but now a whole group of people scattered around the world. John is describing this process, right? This is the human character development, character maturity that God expects his people to reach. A sanctified character, a Christ-like character, okay? Not one tossed about by every wind of deception, right? But one that is now reflecting the character of Christ. In fact, this is what allows our high priest in heaven, this is what allows him to end his mediation. He now says, I have a group of people that have developed spiritually and matured spiritually, so that now it's safe for me to end my mediation, bring an end to this nightmare, right, and restore the earth whole after, of course, the millennium. So this is really what's happening. This is what the book. This is why chapter 7 of Revelation is so significant. It's highlighting who will survive and why they will survive the calamity that God will allow at the very end of time, just before probationary time closes and then after. You see, they live through a time. And see, they have to be sanctified in character because there is no longer a mediator in heaven. You follow that, right? Because they're living after probationary time closes. They're living in a sealed and a sanctified condition. They're not going to be able to look up to heaven after that point and say, Lord, I need to repent. I need to confess this sin. There is no mediator there. There is no one to confess to. You follow, okay? So there are specific reasons why things follow in this order, and we have to be at a certain place in character development. Okay? That's what John is describing as he breaks this number down. That's why this symbolism becomes so important, right? Last week, we started to go through these, right? We went to Judah is first because that's the standard of character. Christ the Messiah came through the tribe of Judah. Did he live an exemplary life for us? The life that he lived, right, the 33 and a half years that he lived, that he had life on it, he lived an exemplary life. He lived a sanctified life. He walked a sanctified road. That was an example to those that should live particularly at the end of time. Okay? That's what God's expectation is this. Is the gospel will the gospel be successful or not? Is the gospel powerful or not? Is the gospel powerful enough to bring a sinner to the place where they're not sinning? You see, some people would say, oh, that can never happen. We'll be sinning up until the time that God changes us. It changes us in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Right? God has a different expectation. In order for him to end his mediation and have a period of time after that point, he has to have a people. He has to have sinners who are not sinning. He has to have people that have grown in their development of character to where they're no longer sinning. They're no longer in need of mediation. Do you follow that? Do you understand the reasoning? This is the reason behind why you have this particular group. Okay? It's the reason why. Judah sets the standard, right? And of course I think we went all the way down to the first 6. We went to Jude, and of course then the next one there is Reuben. We talked about these. Just review the tape from last week, and you'll be able to get these. And what we looked at the names. We looked at the sequence of the names that are presented, right? And I think we went all the way to number 6. We'll go ahead and recover number 6 here, just as an overlap there. Number 6 is significant because it steps away from one of the original tribes. The sixth one that's mentioned there, the tribe of Manasseh. 12,000 were sealed. Okay, and why did we talk about the tribe of Manasseh? Talking about the tribe of Manasseh. Who was Manasseh? That was one of Joseph's sons, right? Remember, Joseph had 2 sons that are listed in here. Probably had more than 2 during his time, but the 2 that are listed here that also received that part of the inheritance. When you look up Numbers chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 48, there might be, I think that's what they are. When you go ahead and look at these, Manasseh and Ephraim both also received of the inheritance. Okay, and this is because Joseph received a double portion. Why would Joseph receive a double portion? You had all these tribes having part of their inheritance, right? You go through Genesis, and you go through Numbers, and you go through Ezekiel, and you see how all the tribes had an inheritance of land when they went into the Promised Land. They were on a journey headed to the Promised Land, right? Their journey took them, 430 years. They were on this journey to go to the Promised Land. In fact, it was 430 years when they left Egypt, so it was longer than 430 years that they were on this journey that had been promised to Abraham, or Abram. And so, but when they went in, Joseph got a double portion. Ephraim and Manasseh also got a portion of the land. And we'll talk about why Joseph got that a little bit later here today. But Manasseh is mentioned here in the book of Revelation. He's not one of the original ones mentioned in Genesis. He wasn't Jacob's son, but grandson. All right, so you have Manasseh. Now, Manasseh, remember we talked about, meant causing to forget. You remember Joseph had kind of a traumatic upbringing. His brothers, because of his dreams that he had and so forth, his brothers hated him. His dad showed favor by giving him a coat of many colors, right? Remember that? And so they said, man, he's getting preferential treatment. And of course, he was Rachel's firstborn son. So he was getting, so there were lots of reasons why Jacob really favored Joseph. But that caused lots of animosity in the family and eventually lots of hatred, to the point where they were comfortable. In fact, what did they want to do? Originally, they didn't want to sell him. What did they want to do?
Kill him.
They wanted to kill him.
He was the youngest.
At that point, yeah.
Usually, if the youngest that's left at home gets a lot more treatment.
Yeah, he's the baby in the family, and
Yeah.
everybody's always a little more tolerant of that, right, Sim? just saying.
Yeah, you can.
Anyway. But anyway, they developed attitudes that were very detrimental. And so Joseph's upbringing, and eventually he was sold to slavery, and we kind of know the story a little bit, wasn't very pleasant. Created a lot of hardship, but he was a very talented, very well educated, very sharp young man. In fact, the Egyptians eventually called him Imhotep, which a lot of people are not aware of. And Imhotep was responsible for the pyramid complex at Saqqara and the building of the step pyramid, etc. There at Saqqara. And also, he how did he get to number 2 status in Pharaoh? How did he get right behind Pharaoh in the kingdom?
Able to
Interpret dreams.
interpret
Interpret dreams.
and
God
stuff,
gave him that ability.
because he was a big dreamer himself.
Well, he saved Egypt, the empire, the kingdom of Egypt. He saved them, and he also saved his own,
From starvation.
the nation Israel as well. So he gets this double portion of inheritance because of that. All right, but Manasseh means causing to forget, his first son there. And the 144,000, you see how this works. The 144,000 have to remember that all that they're going through, that this horrific time of trouble that's never been experienced before, because there's no mediator in the sanctuary any longer, and they're living through this period of time. That's why it's a time of trouble such as never was, right? Because there's no longer a mediator, and there's always been a mediator, etc. And so we're going to have to remember Manasseh. Let me hear you say it. I remember Manasseh.
I
Yeah.
remember my-
Right, I need to remember Manasseh because God is going to cause us to forget at some point all the hardship and privation that this group will experience. Appearances can be deceptive. It doesn't appear as though our senses, remember we talked about our sense, the things we see and hear and feel and maybe even taste, they're going to be an indication to us that we are not going to make it. We are not going to survive. And yet, we're going to have to push past that because the gospel is going to be victorious. All right? And what we're going to need is the same thing that Manasseh. Hey, don't do it. Don't do that.
Boy, see, I got teeth.
Yes, I'm just chewing things all up. So anyway, Manasseh, just like Manasseh and Joseph received that, we're going to have to, the 144,000 are going to have to receive a double portion as well. A double portion of what? What is the double portion that we're going to have possession of? The Spirit, the Holy Spirit. The Spirit is, when the Holy Spirit is poured out in latter rain power, that's a double portion of the Holy Spirit. Okay. Psalm 37:39. The salvation of the righteous is of the Lord. He is their strength in the time of trouble. Okay. Daniel 12:1. At the time shall Michael stand up, the great prince withstandeth for the children of thy people. And there should be a time of trouble such as never was. This is after probationary time closes, that particular time. At that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So God has promised us. How sure is that promise?
It's sure. It's
Ironclad.
my promise.
It's ironclad, right? It's ironclad. No matter what we see, no matter what we're hearing, no matter what experience that we're going through, God's promise is sure. Okay, I have sealed you. I've preserved you. In fact, he says another place in the Psalms, when he preserves us through the time of trouble, what does he make sure for us? Our bread and our water. Okay, he's not, it's not Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's not 7-layer burritos or whatever. It's bread and water, right? Okay. All right.
I think the bread, covers probably other food too.
Okay, so from number 6, now we go to number 7. Okay. And who's after Manasseh? That's just a little review there. Manasseh is Simeon. Simeon. And what does Simeon mean? Simeon means obedient or obedience.
One of obedience.
Son of obedience. Okay. Simeon. That's why we have a Simeon, because we wanted a son of obedience. I guess if we had to do it all over again, we would just have Simeon 1, Simeon 2, Simeon 3.
That's right. Listen up, Jeremy. Bullfrog.
As the plight of the 144,000 is revealed through the tribes mentioned in Revelation, we next move back to Jacob's second son. Here's Jacob's second son, is listed as number 7. Right? He's the 7th in this sequence here in Revelation. Okay? Son of obedience, one who listens, one who obeys. Now, Simeon might be most known for what little escapade early on in his life.
Well, that's they're the ones that really take care of the Ark of the Covenant. So
No.
that's Levi.
That's Levi,
the
right? Levites were the
Levites.
Ark, the sanctuary people. And we'll get to that. That's actually next. Levi's next. But this is Simeon here. And Simeon, when he was growing up, he had a sister named Dinah. Right? And Dinah apparently had been abused. And I think she had been raped. and Simeon was one of the ones with another brother that was going to come to her defense, her rescuer. Okay, and they actually went into the town where this occurred, and they ended up killing all of the men in that town. So I mean that's pretty severe. I mean this was in his mind this was justified retribution for the reputation of his sister, etc.
That's what I call it.
Yeah.
Kill them all.
That's pretty good, Ken. Justified retribution. Is that what you call it? Okay. All right, but anyway, to go from that to B number 7 listed here, I think is important. Simeon was also the one, remember, that was left behind as a hostage during the experience when Joseph planted the cup.
Oh, planted gold or
Planted the gold cup and whatnot, and
corn.
right, and when they went back, in other words, Joseph was testing them this whole time. When he recognized them, they didn't recognize him, and so he's testing them with the whole thing as they come to buy grain from Egypt, and he wants to see what their attitude is concerning their little brother, his little brother. Okay, he knows he has a little brother, and it's their little brother too, and so he's trying to test them to see what their attitude is toward their little brother, and if they've really changed their ways and so forth.
Well, this one was born after Joseph, because Joseph, I thought, was the
Right.
smallest.
Yeah, the small Benjamin's born after Joseph, but Simeon is left behind as a hostage while the brothers go off and bring back Benjamin to just try to show the Pharaoh, the number 2 man there, that what they're saying is true. They're trying to build some trust. Of course, Joseph's playing the game the whole time. All right. So Simeon is the one that's left behind as a hostage, while the brothers venture home to their father and to bring Benjamin back to assist in his release, to prove to the Pharaoh that what we're saying is true. So the connection to Simeon and 144,000 is very striking. Okay, because what did the 144,000 face? We started to get some particulars here what they faced. What were the things that Simeon faced? Did Joseph take Simeon and put him up in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel while he was there in Egypt?
He's keeping him as a hostage.
He was keeping him as a
but I
hostage.
don't know
So he put him in prison.
what he
Quality
in
Inn.
prison.
Yeah, oh, it was the quality. I put him in prison, right? And he was treated as a prisoner, right? And of course, Joseph was allowing that to take place. And so he was experiencing hardship. He was experiencing unjustified indictment. He was experiencing bondage, imprisonment, maybe a bit of persecution, right? But the whole time that's happening, Joseph probably has very specific instructions. You can go so far, but you can't go. You can't take his life. You can't really harm him tremendously, and you can't take his life, okay? Even though he's a prisoner. He's going to be treated as other prisoners, but you can only go so far. So Joseph got control of the situation, right? Now, how is that a parallel to what the 144,000 will face?
What Christ will do with
Here, 144,000 are where they are because they've been a Simeon. They've been ones who have been obedient, right? They've been obedient,
They're tough it through to the end.
right? But they're going through hardship. God is allowing them to go through hardship, privation, hunger, thirst, right? The things you see listed on the board here, right? These are specifically mentioned in regards to the 144,000, right? They're homeless. They're out in the wilderness somewhere. They're being hunted down, right? But God is protecting them. You know, they have limited provisions, etc., etc. You know, they're going through all the things that Simeon here was experiencing on an individual basis. Collectively, they're going through the same. But who has their eye? Who has their eye on them? The
God.
king, the coming king.
Joseph.
The coming king, right? The real Joseph has, which Joseph was a type of Christ, the Messiah. So he has his eye on them still, even though they're going through all this, and he's allowing it. Same thing that happened to Simeon here. Okay. It says their obedience to God's commandments is remarkable, astounding. In fact, it's what allows God to seal them. It's beyond amazing, and it's most necessary for them to play the role that God has asked them to play. Okay? God knows their heart. God knows their character. Right? Their name is written where? The name is written on the forehead, which is the frontal lobe, a symbol of the frontal lobe. God has control of basically the decisions and choices. They've yielded their will.
Sealed in
They've
their
yielded
brain.
they've yielded their will to the lordship of the Messiah, of Christ. Okay. It is what has allowed God to step into it's really what will allow God to step into our reality and rescue the faithful remnant. Okay. All right, so we move on to number 8. Now, number 8, as you see listed there, is the tribe of Levi. Okay. Now, they're listed as number 8 there. The entire tribe was chosen by God to coordinate operations with the sanctuary service, right? Remember, the tribe of Levi, why were they chosen, by the way? Why do you think God chose the tribe of Levi to minister to him in the sanctuary? There was a reason why he chose Levi, the tribe of Levi.
I don't remember what it was,
Okay.
but I remember it. They
didn't worship
Levites.
okay.
That's exactly right. Larry's got it right there. At Mount Sinai, they restricted themselves from being involved with the idol worship of the calf, the golden calf incident. Okay? And so they stood faithful to God, even though everybody else was thinking, it's party time, right? And we don't know what's happened to Moses. He's been gone for 40 days or whatever. And so but the tribe of Levi remained faithful. And so they were chosen by God because of that faithfulness.
It was
In
all
fact-
drunk, dancing around the golden calf.
Right, that was the least of it. Okay. The name in Hebrew means joined, attached, or pledged. You see, they had pledged themselves to remain faithful. They were joined to worshiping God, the faithful God, the true God. And so because of that, see again, here are people that are just living up to their name, right? That their name means to be joined or attached or pledged. And so they're living up to the name that they've been given. The 144,000 have to fall into the same category. God knows he can trust them. He knows that he can seal them because they're going to live up to their name. Right? And of course, they've been given several names. They've been given the name remnant. They've been given the name wise virgins. These are the wise virgins that is described in the 25th chapter of Matthew. Right? How fitting a description of the 144,000. One of the main distinctions was that this tribe received no normal inheritance. Okay? When they went into the promised land, and I'm talking literal Israel now, when they went into the promised land, this tribe didn't get a parcel of land. What did they get?
They got just some land around the city to graze their cattle and stuff. They wasn't. It wasn't. Give to them like a.
Well, remember, this tribe was involved in all of the coordination function of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
Okay? So they weren't really out there herding things, even though maybe some of them may have had a goat or something to provide milk or whatever. But what they received was the support from all of the other tribes. What was that support?
10%.
Exactly. They received the tithe.
But
That was their
they
inheritance.
had so many yards or cubits around the city and to take them half of their cattle and stuff like that they use for food too.
Okay. Well, I know that the offering, the meat that was offered, the offerings that were brought, that's what they would eat and so
They
forth.
got the first meat.
Right, Numbers 16 and Numbers 18, let me read you two scriptures out of there. Numbers 16, verse 9. Seemeth it but a small thing unto you that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel. What did God do with Levi? To the tribe? He separated them, right? He called them out of the great number of people that were
For his
they were
service.
involved there, to bring you near to himself to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them. Right? So that was the purpose of the tribe. That was their mission statement, if you will, in the tribe of Levi. Numbers 16, verse 9. It says, and behold, this is Numbers 18:21. And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth, all the tithe in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. So they're being supported by everyone else, okay? Now, I'm wondering, you have a similar circumstance in heaven,
Yeah,
right? In heaven.
it'll be
When you go back and
some that
when you
won't
read
go
back here
out.
in Revelation, right, where the focus, when the focus momentarily changes to heaven and the multitude that the 144,000 are a part of, then one of the elders specifically goes back and targets this small group, right, and asks the question, where did they come from? Which seems like a strange question to ask, right? Verse 13, one of the elders answered and saying unto me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And of course the word arrayed is a word, I mean everybody in heaven has on a white robe. The 144,000 are pictured as being arrayed, and I think there's a special
Wait.
significance.
Let's look at this for a minute. It says here in verse 9 says, after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man can number, of all nations, kindred, tongues, and people stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. And then if you go to verse 13, one of the elders comes up and he asks John, he says, who are these who are arrayed in white robes?
Okay, so what does that indicate right away?
This is talking about the great multitude. This is not talking about the 144,000.
Oh no, not at all.
Sure.
This is an indication of the exact opposite. Here you have John making the statement, you get this great multitude, everybody's in heaven with a white robe on, and then you got an elder coming and saying, who are these? I mean, they've already stated that there's this great multitude from every nation, kindred, and tongue. It's the great multitude. And then the angel comes and says, who are these arrayed in white robes?
That's what he's asking them. He says, he's here you go. Like there, Jerry says, after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number. And all of the nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues stood before the throne and before the
Right.
Lamb.
And so why the question?
Wait a minute. Clothed with the white robes and palms in their hand. If you go 13 here, it says, and one of the elders came up to John and asked him, saying, who are these who are arrayed in white robes?
Let me ask you a question.
And wait a minute now, let me finish.
Go ahead.
And I said, sir, I don't know. He said,
No, he said to him,
said unto him,
you
sir,
know." He said,
you know. And he said to me, these are the ones which come out of the great tribulation.
Okay, and so are you suggesting that every person that's redeemed, the great multitude, everyone came out of great tribulation?
This is not talking about the whole entire, from creation. This is talking about the ones that says came out of the great tribulation. It doesn't say nothing about those that died in the great tribulation.
Here's the thing. You have to be consistent one way or the other here.
Right.
Okay? If you're going to say that the great multitude, which is from every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, that's all the redeemed, all humanity.
No, that's not what this
Well, all
says.
the redeemed
Wait a
don't
minute.
have white robes.
No, that's not what this says.
Let's look at it. A great multitude, nobody can number. Now you can number the small group. You can
No,
that can be numbered,
144,000.
but you can't number this great group. This
That's
great-
because
of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues standing before the throne and before the Lamb. Okay, so this is all the redeemed
when?
in heaven
But when?
before the throne.
But where did they come from?
This is all the redeemed.
No,
of
no,
all
no, no,
time.
no, 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 no.
So,
When?
right.
Where do they come from?
Who?
This great crowd, this great multitude.
They're all the resurrected saints from all time.
No, they did not. They were not in a great tribulation. This is the ones that's coming out of the great tribulation.
That's right. It's these here. It's specifying this particular group.
So you've got all of them in one group, but there's a certain number of them that have a certain, that are in a special clothing.
Well, let me ask you a question here. When you go down and look at these other things, these are they that have. These are the ones who came out of great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.
See, the others, the one you're talking about,
The resurrected.
is the ones that was given white robes.
Right. Exactly.
That's not the same as the ones that washed their robes in the white in the blood of the Lamb.
Exactly. So this cannot be the great multitude.
I'm agreeing. That is the great multitude from creation. But this is the ones that came. Are you telling me that Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, and all of them was in the great tribulation? No.
No, they weren't.
Okay, then you
The
can't
ones
say
that were
that.
in
That's what I'm saying.
That are
Then
already
this
in
year
white
is the
clothing.
ones that came out of the great
Right.
tribulation.
144,000.
Referring to the entire.
No, it's the great multitude.
Only the 144,000. were in the great
After
multitude.
this, I beheld. I've got to take this as it reads. After this, behold, and lo, a great multitude, which no man can number.
From
Now, this
every
is-
look, from all nations, from
Right.
all tribes,
Right.
from all people,
Right.
from all tongues,
Right.
standing before the throne.
Right.
Okay, this is everybody that's redeemed, that's been resurrected.
No,
This,
it could not be those that come out of the. No, these other people are not in
well,
the great
okay.
tribulation.
I see this, the great multitude, as being all the redeemed. They're all the redeemed.
Okay, then how?
They're all standing
I think
before
I think
God
the reason why
worship.
John puts this in here is because he certainly doesn't want people to come to the conclusion that only 144,000 are going to be in heaven, be part of the redeemed. Okay, so and of course there's been an Adamic dispensation, there's been a Christian dispensation, not just the Jewish dispensation. So he's saying we've got this group that can be numbered. But then we got this other group that cannot be numbered because the redeemed are going to be just unnumberable, right? From every dispensation, from all time. You can't say this
These
great
came
multitude.
out of
Well,
the
then we're
great
just-
tribulation.
All right, so your understanding is the great multitude is the 144,000.
This multitude, not the ones from not Cain, Abel, or not Abel, not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No, no. They were given white robes. These washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb
Which means they were alive.
during the great tribulation.
Right. That's going to be specifically the group, the number the group that's numbered.
But you're saying everybody's going to die except 144,000.
Exactly.
No, no. Okay, if that was so, who is it that in 1 Corinthians 15:52 that says they was changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye?
144,000.
No.
They was already changed. They were already sealed. They were already going to make it.
No, I don't think any
Okay,
of those will be.
who is it that flees into the mountains?
144,000.
Then what good are they? They just well died right from the get-go if they ain't going to do no preaching or nothing.
Any preaching will only be effective before probationary time closes.
That's right.
This is after probation.
During the Great Tribulation, during the 7 trumpets.
Right. So after probation
So
closes,
you're saying everybody during the 7 trumpets going to die?
after probation closes,
That's when we're heading to the hill.
God has left.
Who is going to the hills, Jeremy?
The 144,000 after probation closes.
I think.
Then why would God even bother to do that? I don't understand that. If what good is the 144,000 if there's no one to preach to?
All right, let's just forget the number itself. Let's just say God's going to have a group of people. Okay? A group of people that are going to be left after probation closes.
Right.
They're going to live through.
Right,
They're going to flee to the mountains because of
Right.
persecution and plagues, but they're not. But they're sealed, so they're not going to die.
okay,
Okay. This group, when of course Christ is going to come, he's going to take. There's going to be a resurrection, right? So you're going to have millions of people being resurrected, right?
They're
Those that have been given white robes, you're going to have millions of people resurrected, right? We're all going to go to heaven, right? The ones that are still living, right?
is the 144.
Well, we won't even talk about the number. The group that's still living, they are the ones that will be changed in the moment, the twinkling of an eye.
okay,
They are the ones that are never going to die, never going to taste death.
okay,
Okay, they go up to meet the Lord after the resurrected ones, right? As
okay,
Paul says.
okay,
So you got both groups, those that are resurrected, those that are living, that have
Okay.
lived through. They both go up to heaven, right? Around the throne, you've got this huge multitude now that nobody can number.
okay,
But it's a number of the 144,000, but also of all the resurrected saints as well. They're all in heaven around the throne.
okay, I can understand it.
One of the elders comes, right, and says, who obviously, and of course the 24 elders are well aware of everything that's going on.
Sure they are.
They have come in the second coming as well, right? Because all heaven is empty, right? So they're there. They've experienced. They got all those resurrected ones. They know everything. But they come to John and they ask him that question: who are these arrayed in white robes? Where did they come from?
Not those in white robes. Says those who washed their
Arrayed.
robes in the
Right.
blood of the
Right.
Lamb.
Only, and then when you look at the specifics, when you look at the characteristics, these are the ones that were alive. These are the ones that worship in the temple. Okay, that's only the small group of 104. Well, the small group that were alive. When
But you
look at those
see,
things,
what you're saying is everybody on this earth that is a Christian is going to die
except
before,
except
right, except 144,000.
that small specific group.
No.
And
Yeah,
so
they're the ones that are gonna be standing on a sea of glass singing.
okay, so what you so your
That's-
okay, so your contention is just that, right? The difference between you and I is you're saying the number that's left alive is not a specific number.
Right.
Okay? I'm saying it is. That's the only difference.
I am
Goes.
saying,
That's that's what you're saying. There's a group left alive,
right, which is us.
but we're not going to say what number it is.
There's part of us here that's not going to go by the way of the grave.
Fine, great, right? All you're saying is it's a non-specific number. What I'm
I am
indicating
saying,
is that it is.
okay, pretty
And
much.
there's a
you're right.
reason I'm saying that. We haven't gotten to that yet, but there's a reason why I'm saying that.
What I'm saying is part of us here, if Simeon stays as is and doesn't die in a wreck, time is so close, he will be translated. He will not go by the way of the grave.
Right, there'll be those that
Elijah and him will not go by the grave if they don't go in an accident.
Sure.
They will be translated in the moment, in a twinkling of an eye, according to 1 Corinthians 15:52.
Absolutely.
Okay, then, if these here are alive, are you saying then that they're going to be one of the 144,000?
Could be.
They could be,
Yes.
but is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Is that the only way they're going to make
They're
it?
going to be those that are left alive after probation closes. Whatever number you think it is, that group. Yes. Now I'm
There's
saying
144,000 that
group-
are the mouthpieces of God. They're God's hands, they're God's feet, they're God's mouth. They preach to this untold number right here during the first 7 trumpets. Then after that,
before probation closes.
before probation
That's the only
closes.
time preaching is going to be effective.
Right,
before
and
probation.
then as
And I
soon
think
as
there are millions that are doing that.
well, that's not what Scripture says. It says the 144,000 are going to do that. Now, but of
Well,
course we
along-
will assist.
along
I'm sure
with-
that we will assist. But these 144,000 are like the 12 apostles that are actually the preachers. Of course, there was people that assisted them. But I am saying
Exactly.
that during the 7 trumpets, the 144,000 is going to be preaching to all these lost out here.
Not
There's gonna be
just
lost.
them. I think millions of people will be
Assisting.
assisting.
But the 144,000 are like
I
the
think
12 apostles.
they're in development. They're preparing.
I thought the 144,000 was the end number. of the Christians that were just alive, they could translate it.
No, no. 1 Thessalonians 4, chapter 16, 17 verse says that you shall be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, meet God in the air.
I'm not saying
Right, that
no.
means that there's a group
I'm
alive.
saying this is the number that
You're just
this
saying
is
it's
the end
you're just
result
saying that
of all of it.
you're not willing to say that it's a specific number. That's all you're saying.
No.
I'm willing to say, because of my research, that it is, and there's a reason for it. But we haven't got to that yet. That's all I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is verse 9 here is the great multitude
And it's,
that this elder asked John who they were. And John says, I don't know. He says, but you know. He says, these are the ones that came out of the Great Tribulation. Doesn't say they died in the Great Tribulation.
we
It says
just
they
looked
came
at
out
the
of the Great
difference. We
Tribulation.
just looked at compared the difference between the two. One group can be numbered, the other group cannot. One group was on earth, the other is in heaven. One group is divested into 12 sections. The other group is from every nation, every kindred, every tongue, every people from all time. That's the great multitude. Okay? That's why the elder comes and says, when you got all these people arrayed in white, or dressed in white, you got a small group arrayed in white. That's why the elder comes and identifies.
Dressed
It
in
means
white.
dressed. I think it means it's a little more than just dressed.
It's like dressed nicely.
Yeah, it's like you have a glory, or it's like instead of having street clothes on, you have a suit on, that kind of thing. You're arrayed. You're not just dressed. Okay? Yeah, that's where theology has gone. Basically, theology has come along and said, we're not going to limit those living at the very end, and so we're going to say that that's a great multitude and not a specific number. Okay, so that's where theology has gone. So you're more in line with that thinking,
Yes.
which is fine. That's fine. Okay, no problem. As I've studied it through and looked at other examples, I've come to a conclusion for a specific reason, and we'll talk about that probably next week. But I wanted to get through these particular tribes, if we could. We were just at Levi, number 8 here. The Levites inherit the 10th, right? The tithe were given to them as their inheritance. The 144,000 have also chosen to be separate, joined, and pledged to God for a special purpose, and to receive and to be recipients of the 10th. That's the 10 precepts of God's law that they faithfully follow despite the world's rejection of them. And in other words, the world has its inheritance, which is carnal. God's law becomes the inheritance of the 144,000. That's why they alone can minister in the temple. Okay, not just part of it, but the whole of it. It is their inheritance, and they've become examples themselves of the living law. They are priests forever after the order of Melchizedek, and serve the King of Salem, the King of Peace, in His holy temple forever. So that's number 8. I think we can probably finish these up. And again, I would remind people that are watching specifically that you want to go and dig into these names and the sequence of these tribes listed yourselves. Number 9 on the list there, the next one is Issachar. Now that's the 9th son of Jacob, right? And this is a real necessary reminder. The insight from Issachar will be significant for the 144,000. His name means there is recompense. Now what does recompense
What's that
mean?
name?
Zerubbabel? Or is that Zebulun?
Means like a repayment.
Okay, recompense means basically a reward. There'll be a reward. Okay, there is a reward. No one can even imagine the circumstances that the 144,000 are called to live through. Even the book of Revelation portrays a summary that is encoded, for we could not endure such direct commentary from God.
Zebulun?
Okay. The phrase "time of trouble" is kind of the greatest understatement in the Bible concerning this period of time such as never was. Okay. Issachar is, even during this traumatic period of trial, in fact, this is like a woman in transition in childbirth. It's a total out of the control concept. And so women would be able to relate to that probably more than even men. Issachar is a healing balm. In Issachar, there is a glimmer of hope, a real reward, an understanding and perspective of the bigger picture. Now, in 1 Chronicles 12:32, 1 Chronicles 12:32, it says, "And of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. The heads of them were 200, and their brethren were at their commandment." So in the tribe of Issachar, they had like 200 prophets, let's say, call them prophets. In other words, they had an extra degree of discernment, Scripture says here. "And of the children of Issachar," this is 1 Chronicles 12:32, "which were men that had understanding of the times." And so there was a remnant of people in Issachar that possessed amazing discernment. They understood the times and they knew what to do. In the end, the 144,000 fall into the same category. God's given them an extra degree of discernment. They understand the perspective of end time events. They understand the perspective of the time of the end. Okay. It says, in the end, when the world is absolutely falling apart, the 144,000, they know their Lord, they know what their mission is, they know what the real issues are, they understand what's at stake, and they know Christ and Him crucified. They are the wise virgins. That's why in Daniel, well, 1 John 5:19 says, "And we know that we are God, and the whole world lies in wickedness." So they have a knowledge of God that exceeds the average person. Okay. This is akin to somewhat what we were saying earlier, Larry. In other words, you have millions of Christians that are living during the time of the trumpets, but you have a special group of people that have grown in their understanding of God and whatnot. They are probably more effective in promoting Christianity than the others who have less understanding. Okay, and that's typical in any time, really. You've had people that are kind of further up the ladder, the spiritual ladder, so to speak. So they have greater understanding, greater discernment. In Daniel 12:10, I think these people are once again described. It says, "Many shall be purified and made white and tried." That would describe any person that's become a Christian. You know, they face trials, they face rejection, but they've been purified by the righteousness of Christ. So that would describe any of them. Many that shall be purified and made white and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So wisdom will be a characteristic of these people at the end. This knowledge of real issues and not the ones deceptively presented infuriates the enemies of God. When you have discernment and you can see past all of the, as some people say, all the BS, you are a threat to people because you understand the true issues. And of course, so this facilitates a call eventually, Revelation 13, calls eventually for those in the world who are scheming to eventually kill off the ones that won't comply. And so there's a death decree.
I think they're going to kill them all off, except the 144,000.
Yeah, so there's a death decree eventually. The important thing to remember is that God will have His reward. And what God's reward is of course, ultimately, all of the redeemed is God's reward, right? But at this moment in time, the reward becomes the 144,000. They are the ones that live through, okay? Or whatever number you think that might be, right? Okay, number 10, the next one is Zebulun. As you go through Revelation 7 there, Zebulun.
I thought it was Zebulun.
Okay, different people put a different inflection on some of these. Some people may say it that way, but Zebulun is the one that I've heard often. But he's the 10th son of Jacob, okay? And the message from Zebulun cannot be underestimated. Without it, God's creation, the rest of God's creation would even be in jeopardy. Zebulun means a good endowment. Now that's kind of similar to the last one that we looked
Then
at.
what?
A good endowment. What's an endowment? An endowment, to endow means to provide with a permanent fund, source, or benefit. Okay? So here's the 10th son of Jacob is described as a good endowment. The central issue of the great controversy has always revolved around what? What's the central issue of the great controversy? Revolved around? What's been the main issue? From the very start. Why was there a conflict in heaven? I mean, it started in heaven. Why was there conflict in heaven? You know, Satan said, "Hey, I want to be God. I think there's a better way. I don't think your government, you know, is justified." And of course, what's the foundation of God's government?
Love.
Well, love, but also His law, right? His law of love is the central issue, or the central issue in the great controversy. It has always been the integrity of God's law, and of course, that's reflected in the Bible by the 10 precepts. Zebulon, being the 10th son, links God's law to this most important endowment. It is worth salvaging. It is worth saving. It is worth being saved. It'll be a good endowment, actually, for all eternity. Okay, God's law will never go away. God's law is eternal. So it's going to be a good endowment for all eternity. In every dispensation of time, God has utilized something to illustrate the importance and permanence of His law. During the Adamic dispensation, that would be from Adam to Noah, okay, that first 2,000-year period of time, what did God use to show the permanence and integrity of His law? What did He use? What was the main thing that the Bible brings out during that period of time? Picture of it's hanging up here on the wall.
Was,
Mark Dakota?
Noah's Ark.
Oh, no, no.
Noah's Ark was a symbol of salvation, and particularly the law of God. Okay, it was emblematic of the law of God, the permanence of the law.
that was the blood sacrifices too, wasn't it?
Everything in the construction of the boat pointed to Christ, the living law, and the plan of salvation. Absolutely everything. With the Jewish dispensation, what was it in the Jewish dispensation that pointed to the permanence and integrity of the law?
Sabbath.
In the Jewish dispensation, it was more than just the Sabbath, right? It was the entire tabernacle service. You know, it was the whole tabernacle service. I mean, this was something that people could look at, not just say, "What's the Sabbath?" That's a day, but they could look at this illustration, this object lesson of.
Well, that would be the temple too, because
Yeah.
He said several times through the Bible, you know, that you keep my Sabbath. It's a sign between you and me that.
Right. Okay. So you had in the Jewish dispensation, you had the sanctuary, and then of course the reality of that service, Christ Himself, he is the embodiment of the living law, right? He's the embodiment of the law. So He's right there in that same thing. And then in the last dispensation, what is emblematic is the 144,000. 144,000 become the object lesson of the integrity of God's law. An intriguing example of Christ's character and righteousness. It's the law being lived out in a human life. Okay? Which brings honor to God's law. It's the reality of those 10 precepts lived out in human minds and bodies. Honoring the law through obedience displays character, unspottedness, blameless, and holiness. Christianity has been an agent preserving the world from instant destruction from the very beginning. It's because of those along the way that have honored God's law that the world wasn't just cut short a long time ago. Now with this small remnant, God uses their faithfulness to demonstrate the integrity of His character. 144,000 become a model of the transcript of His holy law. And of course, His character is vindicated through that. That's the importance of Zebulon. Okay, Joseph is number 11. Joseph is truly, and we've been talking about this a little bit, so I can kind of summarize this. He's an Old Testament example of Christ, is what Joseph is. When he went to find his brothers, they conspired to kill him. Same thing happened to the Messiah. When the Messiah was born, Herod, of course, tried to kill him. Joseph was sold into slavery, fitting example of Christ being enslaved by sin or death because of our rebellion. But like Joseph, all this misfortune God turned to good and salvation. So you can just see it example after example. Joseph became the kinsman redeemer for his entire family, and of course Christ did for the world. Joseph ascended to the throne, number 2, beside Pharaoh. Jesus ascended to his Father's throne, sat at his right hand, is number 2 up there, so to speak. So you have all these, and there was, I don't know if you remember, probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we went through a study on Joseph, and we looked at 160 different examples of how his life paralleled the life of the Messiah. It was pretty comprehensive, but you can go online and find a lot of that information. The story of Joseph illustrates the necessity of conviction and trusting in God. Just as Joseph's conviction was necessary for the success of the Jewish nation, so the conviction of the 144,000 is equally necessary for the vindication of God's character. So there's a lot at stake in the development of the 144,000 and the conviction that they have. There's a lot at stake. The very reputation of God, the very honor of God's name is really what is at stake throughout His creation. Okay? So this is the reason for this group of people at the end that grasp hold of the power of the Holy Spirit, and nothing will deter them. Just like God has taken away our reproach with Christ reconciling the world to the Father, Joseph's birth meant the same for Rachel. Remember, Joseph was Rachel's firstborn. She had longed to have her own son. And of course, when he was born, Rachel finally was like, okay, God's finally taken away my reproach, that kind of thing. Just like Christ took away the reproach, reconciled the world to the Father. Let's see. Just skipping down here. Here's an interesting part too. We see in the life of Joseph how this preparation came to his rescue when life went out of control, and it accomplished the same for 144,000. If we remember Joseph's plight when he was in prison and so forth. How about the coat of many colors? Joseph received the coat of many colors from his father. That would symbolize the robe worn by the 144,000. How does that play? Remember the coat of many colors?
Yeah.
What's the robe that the righteous, the 144,000 wear at the end of time? What's the robe that they wear?
When washed in His blood.
Okay, it's the righteousness of Christ, right? That's the white robe of Christ. It's symbolized as a white robe, right? How does Joseph's coat of many colors?
Joseph's many colors was had blood put on it by his brothers to take back to his father.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a whole interesting story about how blood was applied to that. But you see a parallel between the coat of many colors and the robe of righteousness that the saints wear at the end. The robe of we call it a white robe, but it's really a robe of light, right? White light.
It's
What is white light?
righteousness.
What happens when you run white light through a prism? What happens to it?
Get every color.
You get every color, right? So white light, when diffused through a prism, gives you every color. Every color.
It's divided.
It divides it into the rainbow, and that's kind of what's happening with the 144,000 as we break them down. That's the righteousness of Christ. It's that white light being diffused through a prism, and it's breaking down into these 12 segments here.
If that light goes through a whole bunch of drops of water,
It says all
different colors.
It says the coat of many colors Joseph received from his father would symbolize The robe worn by the 144,000 is all colors, a combination initiated and diffused from white light. So basically one and the same. The robe provided by Christ and worn by the 144,000, of course, is his righteousness. All right, so Benjamin is the last one here that's listed, right? Benjamin then, and of course, was the the second son of Rachel, right? So Rachel has two sons, Joseph, and then she has Benjamin after that. Benjamin, the last of the tribes, and the number of completeness, 12 being the number of completeness. This was Rachel's second son, and of course it was complete for her because it was the only other son she would have. And Joseph's only full-blood brother. Rachel died during his birth. You might remember that story in Genesis, I think it's 37, 38, somewhere in that neighborhood. Could be after that. What did Rachel, as she's taking her last breath, what did she call her son's name?
Benoni.
Okay, Benoni. Called him Benoni, right? Now Benoni means the son of my sorrow. The son of my sorrow. And of course, obviously, if she knows she's dying, she knows she's never going to be able to live to see this child grow and develop and become, and loved. She would love him. So it's the son of my sorrow. However, Jacob changes his name, right? Jacob changes his name to Benjamin. And what does Benjamin mean?
Son of my right hand, I think.
Exactly right, the son of my right hand. And so here we see another example of Christ who sits at the right hand of the Father. If there is one word that would describe or define the 144,000, it would be the word complete. The 144,000 are complete. They become complete in a number of different ways. Right? They become complete in their sanctifying development, in their character development and maturity. Right? Remember, Jesus said when he comes, just before he comes, he says in Matthew 13 that the tares grow to what? The tares grow to the full. But what else also grows to the full?
The weeds.
The wheat. So you got the development of the tares and the development of the wheat, right? Growing to full maturity.
Growing together.
Right? The 144,000. That's the wheat growing to full maturity, full character development. Okay? And that's what allows him to end his mediation and to come. Okay, so it says here, this group will be to God as the son, the 144,000 will be to God as the son of his right hand, pictured with the same character as Christ in heaven, the 144,000 on earth. Both a reflection of God's character and a complete and perfect example of the power, character, and integrity of the gospel. Right? Let's see, I'm just skimming through here. And this is why they are identified with Christ and being pictured as washing their garments. Right? Their character is being developed while living. And they develop that Christ-like character while living. That's why it says they wash it in the blood of the Lamb. So you got 12 tribes representing the 12,000, with 12,000 in each group. And so you have a perfect representation of a four square type thing, 12 by 12. The reason God's people and the holy city are also called the bride of Christ is that they also display the complete and perfect marriage that took place, a perfect representation and symbol of the covenant relationship between the Father and the Son. So because of what they coveted to do, even before the problem began, now they have a recompense, they have their reward, and it's the bride. It's the bride of Christ. It's the holy city with all the redeemed in it. Even the walls of the city are 144 cubits wide, another numerical marker symbolic of this end-time group. And of course, even in Noah's Ark, you had 144 deck support timbers in that blueprint. Though the symbolism is extensive concerning the small group, God takes things a step further by making the number also literal and for a very specific reason. And that's where we're going next week. We're going to be looking at these numbers more specifically and trying to understand, and is there a biblical precedent precedent to understand why God would have a group of people with this number in it. Here's the thing. God is going to have, everybody agrees, even all theologians agree, there's going to be a number of people at the end that are alive. Okay? You agree with that, right? The only question is, could this number be 144,000? Or is it just some other arbitrary number? Okay? I think there's a reason why it's mentioned here in Scripture specifically, and there's a reason why it is 144,000. And we'll talk about that next week. All right. Anyway, good discussion, good questions, good thoughts. Really, this whole chapter, the emphasis of this whole chapter, from our perspective, pre-second coming, pre-close of probation, is character development. And that's why I brought my pillow back up here. You know, it's not what's behind us, you know, it's not what's behind us, right, or what lies before us, but it's what's inside that is going to make all the difference. Not only to our own salvation, but also how God can use us as we go forward from this time. Right? How God can use us. What an honor to be a person that never tastes death. You're going to have to be a strong person. You're going to have to be a person that's willing to yield, recognizing the perspective that we have to yield in order to really make it. Because by yielding, God fills up that void, God takes control.
You get rid of self.
Self has to be buried. That's Paul says we have to die daily, right? Have to die daily. Okay. All right, so anyway, we're way past, but that's okay. This is God's time, His day. We relish in it. We're joyful in it. And so we'll wrap it up here, and next week we'll get more specific with the numbers themselves and probably finish up on chapter 7 next week. All right? All right, so let's bow our heads and let's bow our heads for prayer. Father, we want to thank you and praise you for your wonderful plan of salvation, and also the manner in which your name will be glorified at the end, more specifically. Everything about life is only possible because of you. You make it all happen. And you've provided this opportunity for salvation to all of humanity. That grace that brings salvation has appeared to all humanity. And so we're thankful, Lord, for not only the opportunity for eternal life, but for the privilege, for the honor to bring glory and honor to your name. We pray that you will accomplish that in our lives, that we will grow to the place where we can reflect your character. Sinners who no longer fall into the trap of sinning. We know that at some point you're going to end your mediation, and there'll be people that will be living through whatever period of time the plagues are falling with no mediator. And so we're thankful, Lord, that you're willing to seal us through that time, to protect us, but also that before our probation closes, to use us to make an impact on others. So guide and direct in our lives that we might be used by you. And we thank you for the honor. Bless not only our fellowship afterwards, but bless the food that you've prepared. May it nourish and strengthen us to accomplish your service. And we ask these blessings in Jesus' most wonderful name and for his sake. Amen and amen. Okay, well, thanks for you got your comments, your questions, your discussion. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for joining us online. Hope you guys have a great week. And remember, God is always working in and behalf to bless you. Take a notebook and jot those things down as you recognize it. And we'll see you next time right here, homechurch.us. Have a great week. Catch you later.